Good evening and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. I'm Rebecca Munro and this is Scotland at 7. Today I am joined by Collette Stevenson, MSP, and Lesley Orr. So Collette, how are you this evening?
I'm fine, Rebecca. It's lovely to be on again, and thanks very much for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you. And Lesley, how are you doing this evening?
Yes, I'm okay too, thanks. Nice to meet you, Rebecca, and nice to see Collette again.
Nice to meet the both of you. So we will start off with a quick coronavirus update and then we'll get to some of the questions in our top stories for this evening. So, as of 2 p.m. today, a total of 2,503,237 people in Scotland have been tested through the NHS Scotland labs and UK Government regional testing centres since the start of the pandemic. Of these, 2,155,219 have been confirmed negative, 348,018 have tested positive. There are 1,016 new cases of COVID-19 confirmed by a test, although not everyone with the virus will display symptoms and not all those with symptoms will be tested. There are 9 new reported deaths of people who have tested positive. The number of patients in Scotland who have died from complications caused by the coronavirus infection now stands at 7,952. This number only includes those who have died having received a positive test for the virus in the previous 28 days. Of the people who have tested positive, 406 were in hospital last night, 61 of whom were in intensive care. As of 8 a.m. this morning, 4,014,212 people had received their first dose of the coronavirus vaccine and 3,231,331 had received their second dose. The latest UK daily figures up until yesterday show that 129,881 patients who tested positive for COVID-19 have sadly died from their illness, an increase of 138 since yesterday. This number refers to deaths in all settings, not just hospitals. Now on to the ONS update. The percentage of people testing positive continued to increase in England by 1.57%. By Wales it was 0.62% and Northern Ireland was 1.48% in the week ending the 24th of July 2021. In Scotland the positivity rate decreased by 0.94%. There were 392 deaths involving coronavirus registered in the UK in the week ending the 23rd of July 2021. Of these, 308 were registered in England, 16 were registered in Wales, 56 were registered in Scotland, and 9 in Northern Ireland. The number of deaths from all causes in the UK in the week ending the 23rd of July 2021 was 11,160, which is 7.8% above the average for the corresponding week in 2015 to 2019. Now on to our first story, which is the First Minister's COVID statement. In a statement to a virtual Holyrood meeting today, First Minister announced the changes in COVID regulations which will come into effect on August the 9th. The legal requirement for physical distancing and limits on gatherings will be removed on the 9th of August when all venues across Scotland are able to reopen. Some protective measures will stay in place, such as the use of face coverings indoors and the collection of contact details as part of Test and Protect. Capacity limits of 2,000 people indoors and 5,000 people outdoors will also remain in place, although some exceptions may be possible on a case-by-case basis. These will be reviewed on a 3-weekly basis to ensure they remain proportionate. Adults identified as close contacts of someone who has tested positive for COVID-19 will also no longer be automatically required to self-isolate for 10 days from the 9th of August. Anyone who is double vaccinated with at least 2 weeks passed since their second dose and who has no symptoms will be able to end self-isolation if they return a negative PCR test. The same conditions will also apply to anyone aged between 5 and 17 years old, even if they have not been vaccinated. The requirement to take a PCR test will not apply to children under the age of 5. Test and Protect will also implement revised guidance for under 18s. This means that a blanket isolation of whole classes in schools will no longer happen, and a targeted approach that only identifies children and young people who are higher risk close contacts will be adopted. Fewer young people will have to self-isolate and most will be asked to self-isolate for a much shorter period of time. To allow time to monitor the impacts of these changes, the majority of the mitigations that were in place in schools in the previous term will be retained for up to 6 weeks. This will help support a safe and sustainable return to education after the summer break. While the gateway condition on vaccination has been met, with 92% of those over the age of 40 protected by 2 doses of the vaccine, there are still many more people who have not had the vaccine and cannot have it or are not yet eligible for it. Invitations for vaccines are now going out to 12 to 17-year-olds with specific health conditions and make them more vulnerable to COVID. First Minister Nicola Sturgeon said the move beyond level 0 will entail the lifting of most of the remaining legally imposed restrictions, most notably on physical distancing and limits to the size of social gatherings. It also means that from the 9th of August, no venues will be legally required to close. Declaring freedom from or victory over this virus is, in my view, premature. The harm the virus can do, including through the impact of long COVID, should not be underestimated, and its ability to mutate may yet pose us real challenges. Some baseline measures will remain in place, such as it will continue to be the law, subject to exceptions, that face coverings must be worn in indoor public spaces and on public transport. Test and Protect will continue to contact trace and positive cases. To assist with this, there will be a continued requirement for indoor hospitality and similar venues to collect the contact details of customers. Anyone who is required to self-isolate will, if eligible, continue to have access to support. Travel restrictions will continue to be used as and when necessary to restrict the spread of outbreaks and protect against the risk of importation of new variants. The Scottish Government will continue to advise home working where possible, recognising that some staff will start to return to offices in line with staff wellbeing discussions and business needs. Employers will be encouraged to consider for the longer term, as the Scottish Government is doing, a hybrid model of home and office working, which may, of course, have benefits beyond the need to control a virus. For a limited period of gateway process through which organisers of outdoor events of more than 5,000 and indoor events of more than 2,000 will have to apply for permission will remain. This will allow us and local authorities to be assured of the arrangements in place to reduce risk. Appropriate guidance will continue to be issued to assist individuals and businesses to reduce the risk of transmission as much as possible, such as rigorous hygiene, including regular hand washing. So, Lesley, COVID status certificates, which will include vaccination details to facilitate international travel, are due this month. Are you a fan of COVID identification papers?
Well, I've ordered and received my paper certificate from NHS because I'm actually going to Spain at the end of the month for my niece's wedding. So I'm very happy to comply with that, and I think it's helpful to have a kind of straightforward way, an accessible way that people can very quickly and simply show what their status is. Whether they've had the vaccines and whether other things connected with how the virus has or hasn't affected us. I mean, I think there's always a bit of a concern about the notion that we have to have proven that we've got vaccinations and so on in order to travel or to access foreign travel. I think on balance, I'm in favour of that really, because these are conditions that people have been complying with for years in relation to travelling to different parts of the world where other kinds of disease and illness are dangers. We have malaria and other forms of injections before travelling to certain places. So I think it's important if it enables people to do that. But I do think there are some concerns that we have to maybe build in, allowances for or particular requirements or mitigation of requirements, just in order to ensure that where there are reasons and good reasons why people haven't had vaccinations or can't do so, that will be taken into consideration, that there won't be a kind of blanket ban that means there's a kind of, there are those who get to go abroad or get to travel and others who don't. So on balance, I think this is a good thing, and I think anything that makes it easier and more accessible is certainly very helpful for us.
Yeah, definitely. And Collette, I mean, from the 9th of August, PCR tests are going to help with reducing the 10-day isolation. If you've been identified as a close contact, but you've been double jabbed, you can take the PCR test, and if you're negative, you can end self-isolation. Do you think we're maybe seeing the light at the end of the tunnel at the moment?
Absolutely, Rebecca. I mean, the news that came from the First Minister today was very welcoming. And whilst, I know that throughout the summer, I myself have been attending, and visiting various different community-based groups. The PCR test's available, whilst it's not scientific, like proven that it can be a double negative or whatever, but it is amazing to think that going forward, restrictions have eased actually somewhat, and I think the most of the Scottish population will be delighted with the news today on that. Um, with regards to even young people, I mean, I raised a question in Parliament as well today about the vaccination of young people, particularly people that are, have got like maybe additional support needs and disabilities, and ensuring that they're signposted as well. So I'm absolutely delighted with the news.
Yeah, and I mean, similar, and I mean, it was said that the PCR tests, Lesley, will improve school pupils' learning because you're not going to have large groups of school children having to leave because one person's caught COVID. Do you agree with the Scottish Government that this will minimise disruption in schools? If you test negative, then you can go back in.
Well, it's clearly going to make a big difference compared with the situation as it currently stands, and anything that stops, that really enables young people to be at school and to be at school with their friends and with others, and in a proper kind of classroom environment. That's because I know how disruptive this whole pandemic has been in so many ways for so many young people. It's affecting clearly their education, and but also the kind of social aspects of being at school and being in that environment. It's been very difficult, very stressful for teachers as well. But actually, I was speaking to the daughter of a friend of mine recently, and and she was just telling me how incredibly disruptive this kind of stop-start thing and not knowing, and then having to kind of go back home and back into that kind of online environment, which is very problematic and actually makes provision and access to education very unequal, because the factors that are applying people's home situations are so various and so different. So yeah, I mean, this is good. This is anything that really enables the kind of return to, I'm not going to use that word normality, because I think in so many ways what we thought of as normal pre-pandemic, we've really had to take stock and think what kind of society do we want to have, and it's kind of maybe taken us back to reflect on some of the bigger, deeper issues about the way in which society is structured. But to get back to the question of the PCR tests and young people not having to isolate, I think it's a no-brainer really that this is a good thing. This is a very helpful thing. And as the First Minister said, it's not yet the case that young people are eligible for vaccination. So in the meantime, this is a really important provision, which hopefully will support them as they go into the new school year, with the kind of confidence that they can just kind of get on with it and just enjoy being back at school, back in that kind of environment, without always wondering, when am I next going to have to get back home and be on my own again?
Yeah. And Collette, do you think it's wise then? I mean, I know we're saying it would be great to go back, well, not more normality as Lesley would say, but, go back to a semblance of perhaps what it once was. But do you think it is still wise to continue with other mitigations, like wearing a face mask and keeping a metre apart from like teachers and students and that sort of stuff?
Oh, absolutely, wholeheartedly. It came up again today, and obviously on a remote chamber. why we're still putting in law that we should be wearing face masks when down south they aren't. I completely agree with wearing the masks. We're protecting other people, and I think that's incumbent on us to do that. And it's interesting. I had a conversation afterwards with my daughter who's just turned 18, and I was saying to her, this is going to be the first time that you're going to be able to have attend a nightclub. And she was like, I know, it's fantastic. And she's like, I can't believe it. And I said, but you need to wear your face mask. And she was like, all right, okay. No, but I was like, but you're protecting other people and obviously keeping your distance. And she went, that's fine. I'm not there to kiss anybody. I'm there to actually dance anyway. So, on a more serious note, I think what the First Minister announced today about, the restrictions in terms of wearing your face masks, and social distancing is key to this, because the figures that are coming out, are evidence that we are still experiencing it, and there's still, hospital admissions for COVID as well.
Yeah, I suppose it's a positive statement, but we need to remain cautious. Cautious, I suppose. Cautiously optimistic, maybe. But anyway, we'll move on to the next story, and that is the SNP Green Coalition. So there are reports that the SNP are close to concluding a cooperation deal with the Scottish Greens that will create a majority pro-independence bloc in the Scottish Parliament, with the possibility that some Green MSPs will be offered ministerial roles in the Scottish Government. The SNP won the May elections with an increase in their vote and won an additional seat, but they were still one MSP short of an overall majority. A formal deal with the pro-independent Scottish Greens put beyond any doubt or any questions of there being a mandate for Scottish independence in the Scottish Parliament. Having 64 SNP MSPs and 7 Green MSPs sitting together means that 71 out of the 129 MSPs in the Scottish Parliament were elected on a pro-independence manifesto. There will be issues on contention over aspects of environmental policy, however. The COP26 meeting in Glasgow in November will create an incentive to overcome any differences. So, Lesley, do you think that a coalition will make independence more credible to the British government?
I think there are probably signs that it will. The kind of utterances I'm hearing coming from Gove and others suggest that there is a slight kind of, the language coming out from the UK government, it has changed a little bit in response to this, because, there's no getting away from it. This is a clear majority in the Scottish Parliament in favour of independence. And, since the Scottish Parliament was designed, our voting system was designed really to avoid one party having a majority government, and prior to 2000 that one-off time when there was an absolute majority that the SNP held. I think this is kind of common practice across Europe and other parts of the world, where democracies operate on a proportional representation system. And it's, as I think Patrick Harvey said, this is what grown-up politics should look like, that clearly there's a lot of, I'm kind of going beyond just the constitutional issue here, but that, of course, that's important. That's pretty fundamental. And the response of the Labour Party in Scotland reflects that. But what I was going to say is really just that when you've got parties which clearly have a lot of common ground on a lot of the kind of social and economic policies that the majority of people in Scotland support, it makes a lot of sense for those people to work together and to collaborate in constructive ways, and also to be held accountable. I think for me this is quite important. I think the best kind of in Scotland, I would say, the best governments that we've had in recent years have been when the SNP has had to keep, has not just been able to drive forward, but has had to be attentive to what the Green Party in particular has to say and to offer in policy terms, as you were saying, particularly on the environment. I'm all in favour. I think the time is long past actually when we need really radical action on climate change and the environment, especially with COP26 coming up. And if this coalition, which allows space, I think it will allow space for the minority partner, which is the Green Party, to voice criticisms and to make quite legitimate challenges to the majority party on issues to do with the environment, that can only be a good thing. The SNP has talked a good game on the environment for a long time and has implemented a lot of really worthwhile policies, and is the direction of travel is good, but there's more that could and should be being done. Particularly, I think there's sometimes mixed messages, inconsistent messages that come out of the government about things like oil and gas and just transition. There's the issue of this the proposal. The Cambo oil field should be open for exploration, and I think we need action on that if we're going to demonstrate that we're really serious on taking our responsibilities as a global nation on climate change. So these are some of the issues around which I think this is a really positive development, actually, and I'm all in favour of it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we'll move on to the next story, and that is the new National Facility for Families Affected by Drug Use. A new residential rehabilitation facility to support families affected by drug use is to be developed in North Ayrshire. Funding for the National Specialist Residential Family Service, which will be run by the Charity and Housing Association Phoenix Futures and based in Saltcoats, North Ayrshire, has been agreed in principle. The facility will provide rehabilitation services for 20 families at any one time and will be based on an existing facility run by the organisation in Sheffield. Once given final approval, funding for the development will be made available from the £100 million announced as part of the national mission to improve and increase the provision of residential rehabilitation. Meanwhile, following the publication of the latest drug-related death statistics, an urgent review has been ordered on the use of so-called street benzos after latest statistics showed the drugs were implicated in 73% of drug-related deaths in 2020. Benzodiazepines are usually prescribed for the treatment of anxiety and insomnia. However, increasingly, illicit supplies of street benzos are being used with opiates such as methadone and heroin, contributing to poly-drug use in Scotland. The Rapid Evidence Review will look at who is using the drugs and why, in order that measures to reduce demand can be introduced. It follows works by the Drug Deaths Task Force to develop guidelines on the consistent prescribing of benzodiazepines across the country so that people can be offered support for their drug use and any underlying mental health problems. Other actions include commissioning research on the role and risks of methadone in drug-related deaths, awareness campaign on the increasing availability of naloxone and its benefits, awareness campaign on stigma and its negative effect on people seeking treatment, consider whether alcohol and drug services should be included in new National Care Service as part of the consultation, and setting a target for the number of people in treatment for 2022. So, Collette, do you agree that keeping families together in safe residential areas is crucial in supporting parents who have been blighted by drugs?
Absolutely, Rebecca. It's an issue that's very close to my heart. Having lost my own brother to a heroin overdose way back in 2002. Now, one of the things that I had did during the last few weeks was visited the Beacons, which is based in Blantyre, and they're intending to come along and move in and have a facility in East Kilbride as well, which is long overdue. One of the things about families and the message that used to come out from well, as far as where we were concerned, was it's tough love. If you had somebody in your family who had any kind of addiction, it was, you know, you're actually only feeding their habit. You need to actually, they need to get to rock bottom before they're actually going to get better. That is so bad in so many ways. I mean, the guilt for the family involved in that, and the young person or the person that's involved in the addiction is just absolutely awful. And it doesn't do the families or the person that's suffering with the addiction any problem. So it was absolutely music to my ears to hear that there's actually support there, and it's all, person centered, for that person, for the families, for the children as well, that are affected by addiction, and just the support mechanisms that are in place, recognizing when somebody's maybe ready to actually, overdose as well, and the naloxone kits that they've got available. When I attended the Beacons, they actually showed me one of them and how to use it, and it's so easy to use. And even the telltale signs about overdose as well is incredible, and it'll go a long way. And I've spoke to family members as well who have over the years had years of either whether it's been through the prison system, and trying to, knocking their heads off the wall, trying to get help and support for this person that they love, and they can't get any help whatsoever. Is absolutely welcoming to hear Angela Constance talk today, that we're turning this tide, and we're actually doing something about it. But meanwhile as well, that family support mechanism, I think, is absolutely here.
Yeah, and Lesley, I mean, although men are statistically more likely to die from drug misuse, there's now a very worrying increase of deaths among mothers who've had their children removed because of their persistent drug use. I mean, should more facilities across Scotland provide much needed childcare to help support mothers with drug addictions? And should this perhaps be included in the new National Care Service?
I think that makes that perfect sense, actually. The whole thing is about, kind of shifting that orientation away from thinking of drugs as a criminal justice issue to about care and well-being. And as Collette has so eloquently spoken, and out of the pain of her own personal experience, this is about, families and relationships and connections and supporting those. It's about, I kind of think, you want to support people in their strength, to find the strength, not to kind of dwell on blaming people for their weakness or for their loss. And it's really urgent, actually, I think, to provide that kind of support for parents, mothers particularly, with children, because that is such a fundamental issue for folk if they're going to seek and benefit from the kind of support, the kind of residential rehabilitation, therapeutic support, fairly intensive, that is required. So, if that can be incorporated into our National Care Service, that's a real step in the right direction, demonstrating the kind of intention that Scotland has to shift away from the old failed ways of supposedly tackling the national disgrace of drugs death and drugs misuse and all the hurt and pain that it causes to so many people around Scotland. So let's do that. Let's hope that Angela Constance will really, show bold leadership in the work that she's been tasked with undertaking.
Yeah, definitely. Well, we'll move on to our next story of this evening, and that is that a far-right hate group display racist banner on top of Ben Nevis. The far-right hate group who unfurled a racist banner on top of Ben Nevis have been condemned as utterly abhorrent. Patriotic Alternative, who call for an all non-white people removed from the UK, was founded in 2019. It had previously been involved with the BNP. A small group of Patriotic Alternative members climbed Scotland's highest mountain yesterday and unfurled a huge White Lives Matter banner. Witnesses at the summons said that the group were booed by climbers and appalled by the racist display. The banner was only unfurled for a few minutes before being hidden away again. The SNP's Westminster leader, Ian Blackford, responded by saying, "These racists are not welcome here." So, Collette, I mean, how intellectually challenged do you have to be to put up a White Lives Matter sign on one of Scotland's most cultural, iconic sites?
I don't know, honestly, what they were thinking of, to be honest with you. It's incredulous, you know, in this day and age and everything that's coming out, and, you know, after the actual initiative that came out and, you know, to do with Black Lives Matters, why go to those lengths up to Ben Nevis to actually put up a poster, you know, or a huge big banner? And I did see it. That size and the effort that they've went to climb Ben Nevis to do that. It's absolutely awful, and you know, and Ian Blackford is absolutely right to call them out on it. There's no place in our society, in our local communities, for that type of, you know, racist comments and you know, that message that they're trying to get across. So I'm sorry, they should be lambasted for what they did.
And Lesley, I mean, after hearing about this, people were obviously saying that it was absolutely abhorrent about the White Lives Matter. However, I have to say I was very surprised by the number of people who also criticised Black Lives Matter, saying that the phrase should actually be all lives matter. I mean, where do you stand with this?
Rebecca, could you just clarify, are you meaning sort of more generally and particularly last year when the Black Lives Matter movement was really being galvanised? Because I think, you know, this particular incident, you know, everything that Collette says, I completely agree with. But, you know, that's a minuscule, tiny, ludicrous little minority of people. And in one sense, you kind of want to say, let's just ignore them, because what they're looking for is publicity, and you know that's clearly why they went to all that effort to go up the hill. But I mean, really, it is nonsense. It's nonsense to speak out of a kind of the privilege, the way in which our society, you know, our white majority society, where people. White people have never had to deal with or respond to the levels of persecution and discrimination and abuse and mundane, everyday kind of, just prejudice, really. Prejudice that isn't just at the individual level, but we know is structural and is cultural. You know, so for people somehow to imagine that by highlighting why and in what ways Black lives particularly matter, and what that challenges us to do to recognise and to ensure that the lives that matter really, you know, are lives that never encounter that kind of prejudice and abuse. So to take that very telling phrase or slogan or, you know, whatever you want to call it, which has been so important as a rallying point globally, actually, and you know, do this nonsensical thing out of a place of, you know, great kind of privilege and ignorance about the realities of racism is really pretty stupid, and needs to be countered at every opportunity. So thank you for giving me another opportunity to do just that.
That's no problem. Well, we will move on to the next story, and that is that a fourth officer who responded to the US Capitol attack dies by suicide. A fourth police officer who defended the US Capitol during the 6th of January insurrection by extremist supporters of Donald Trump is now confirmed to have taken his own life. Washington, D.C.'s Metropolitan Police Department confirmed late on Monday that another of their officers, Kyle DeFreitag, died by suicide earlier in January, just hours after declaring that MPD officer Gunther Hashida killed himself on the 29th of July. In January, MPD officer Jeffrey Smith, a 12-year veteran of the force, and Capitol Police officer Howard Lebegudud, a 16-year veteran, both of whom also responded to the 6th January attack, died by suicide. DeFreitag, who was 26, was deployed to protect the Capitol after police cleared the building of rioters and was involved in enforcing a curfew, the department said. The MPD chief, Robert Conte, had notified personnel of DeFreitag's death on the 10th of July in a department-wide message. He had been an MPD officer for 5 years, according to his obituary. Hashida had helped secure the Capitol on the 6th of January as part of the emergency response team within MPD's Special Operations Division after a mob of thousands of Trump supporters stormed the building. The announcement of the deaths of DeFreitag and Hashida came a week after several officers testified to a House of Representatives Select Committee investigating the 6th of January insurrection, when extremists stormed the Capitol to try to stop the certification of Joe Biden's win over Trump in the 2020 presidential election. That attempt failed, and Biden's victory was successfully certified by Congress in the early hours of the following morning. So, Collette, that's now 4 police officers, all who guarded the US Capitol on the day of the riot, that have died by suicide. I mean, why do you think this? Do you think it's just guilt?
It would appear so, and a real inherent guilt at that as well, which is absolutely dreadful. You've got to question what actions have been taken by the police force over in America to actually try and address some of the issues that these police officers have gone through. I mean, I know that they had, I'm not sure if it's the 2, the 4, but some of them had to testify at a select committee, and it would be really, I don't know enough about it, but what I would like to know is, in what respect, how were they treated? What support mechanisms have been put in place to try and help these? And an alarm bell should be absolutely ringing about this, given that's the 4th officer who's now committed suicide, and he's only 26. How sad is that? It is absolutely awful. 4, 2 should be ringing alarm bells. 4 is, we definitely should be looking at what actions or what's being put in place to try and help and assist these and give them every kind of, coaching, guidance, counselling that they could possibly need.
Yeah, no, that's very true. Yeah, definitely. Well, we'll move on to our next story, and that is on Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya in London and the suspicious death of the Belarus activist Vital Shishua. So the UK is on the side of the Belarusian opposition leaders trying to bring the tyrannical regime led by Alexander Lukashenko to an end, Boris Johnson said today. The Prime Minister gave full support to Svetlana Tsikhanouskaya, who at the forefront of efforts to restore democracy in the face of the crackdown on civil society in the East European country. Welcoming Tsikhanouskaya to Downing Street hours after the head of a group that helps Belarusians fleeing persecution was found dead in a park in Ukraine. In the Ukraine capital, Johnson said the UK backed Tsikhanouskaya's struggle against severe human rights violations and the persecution of pro-democracy activists. The Prime Minister also highlighted the speed at which the UK announced sanctions against Belarus after the hijacking of a plane carrying other prominent anti-Lukashenko organiser Raman Pratasevich, who was taken into custody by the country's authorities at the end of May after a Ryanair flight was forced to land in Belarus. Earlier today, the head of Kyiv-based non-profit organisation that helps Belarusians fleeing persecution was found dead in a park in the Ukrainian capital. Police are treating the death as a possible murder. Vital Shishua, the head of Belarusian House in Ukraine, was reported missing by his partner on Monday after he failed to return from a run and could not be reached on his mobile. Belarusian citizen Vital Shishua, who had gone missing in Kyiv yesterday, was found hanged in one of Kyiv's parks, not far from where he lived, police said in a statement, adding that they had opened a murder investigation and would pursue all leads, including a possible murder disguised as a suicide. Friends and colleagues suspect Shishua was targeted for his opposition to the government of Alexander Lukashenko, which has launched a broad crackdown on the opposition in Belarus and begun a campaign to hunt down its members abroad. So, Collette, Lukashenko rules Belarus with an iron fist after an alleged rigged election. Do you have any doubts that Vital Shishua's death by hanging was suicide, as the police suspect?
Huge question marks over that, Rebecca. And given what's been going on in Belarus recently as well, and I mean, again, I would allude to the fact that I don't know enough about it all. It all seems very suspect to me. Call me cynical, but it all sounds very suspect, and I feel that there maybe needs to be more done in terms of inspecting the human rights from out with to see what's actually going on in Belarus before there's any further deaths, whether that be suspect, at least an investigation to identify what's going on there.
Yeah, and Lesley, I mean, there have been a number of worrying detentions and disappearances of activists and journalists opposed to Lukashenko's regime. I'm thinking here of Roman Protasevich, who was forcibly taken off a domestic flight and taken to Minsk. I mean, are there sanctions imposed by the EU and the UK and the US? Are they sufficient to have any influence over Lukashenko and his regime?
Well, clearly not. I think I maybe have more liberty than an MSP to say. I think, Lukashenko is a dictator who runs a rogue terrorist state, and the repression, the level. It was around this time last year that he won his sixth election with an 80% vote, an election that was neither free nor fair by any standards, certainly not by those of experts looking at it from outside. And there were mass protests. The movement of mass protests on the streets of Minsk and other Belarusian cities went on for months. And that's kind of stopped now. It's all gone quiet on the streets because there have been there's been about 35,000 arrests, and journalists have been detained. As you say, that young guy whose name I can't remember now, who was that plane, a plane going from one country to another, neither of which was Belarus, was hijacked really in order that they could arrest that guy and detain him off the plane. I mean, this guy Lukashenko is an absolute rogue. He's running a rogue state, seemingly with impunity. And it is important. It's important, of course, that Boris Johnson declared the UK government's support for the opposition and to say, we're with you. How does that? How is that manifested? Sanctions are important, but again, this guy's smart. This guy and his henchmen, that run around the world, attacking those who are resisting this dictatorship, and apparently, actually, in response to the EU sanctions, the European Union sanctions, there's another whole kind of layer of what's going on, that Lukashenko is now weaponizing migrants and the flow of migrants, because he's allowing more or less free passage of people seeking, to as refugees to travel from places like Pakistan and Iraq through Belarusia and into Lithuania, which is on the border with them. And he is absolutely doing that in order to have a go to get at the EU for imposing sanctions. So he'll always find a way, and clearly he's had plenty of years of practice at being a very effective dictator who just kind of rides roughshod over any notion of democracy, with absolutely no care or concern either for the individuals who are resisting and opposing him within Belarus, or for the rule of law in his own country, or the global rule of law. I mean, honestly, what do we do in response? You kind of sit here feeling really helpless, and that opposition leader who met with the Prime Minister today, she's a brave woman. There's a lot of really brave people, seeking to resist and to find effective ways to protest. And if they can't even do that safely in exile, what are we going to do in response? It's a really challenging situation. And to be fair, it's not an easy one to find a good diplomatic response to, because if you do try to impose economic sanctions, where do you go from there? Where do you go? What's the next step? We don't want to be declaring war, and yet it can't. It's not sustainable that this sort of thing happens with impunity.
Yeah, and Collette, as Lesley mentioned, I mean, Svetlana Tikhanovskaya, the exiled Belarusian opposition leader, she was in London today and she met Boris Johnson, and last week she met the US President Joe Biden, and she's trying to kind of move Belarus up the agenda for Western countries. But do you think that this tour will be successful and she will move the agenda up?
She definitely, as Lesley said, she's definitely a brave woman for taking that on board. Very brave for doing that. And I sincerely hope that, she's been heard, loud and clear by Boris and by the US as well, to actually raise the concerns that she's got, and the very real big concerns there is as far as human rights and humanity and the way that people are actually being treated over there. So I hope and pray that she does get that level of support, and they listen to her and they take whatever sanctions are and meet them out at in order to actually stop him from carrying on doing what he's doing. As you say, as Lesley did say, it is a dictatorship and it shouldn't be allowed in this day and age.
Yeah, true. Well, we'll move on to our next story of the evening, and that is funding to support equality and human rights. Organisations across Scotland will share £21 million of funding over 3 years to advance human rights, promote equality and tackle discrimination. A total of 48 organisations, including 5 specialist human rights organisations, will benefit from the new Equality and Human Rights Fund. Overall, this new 3-year programme will provide an additional £1 million per year for organisations dedicated to tackling inequality and discrimination, furthering equality and advancing the realisation of human rights in Scotland. One of the charities set to receive funding for the first time is Civil Rights First, which provides specialist legal advice and representation to people with protected characteristics such as ethnicity, age or disability. Other organisations include Intercultural Youth Scotland, Generations Working Together and Neighbourhood Networks in Scotland. So, Collette, the Equality and Human Rights Fund is, changed my mind there, it's an ambitious vision, I suppose, to ensure an inclusive Scotland. And do you think that the £7 million per year over 3 years between these 48 organisations will live up to the Scottish Government's expectations?
Well, I sincerely hope so. It's quite a large sum of money, and particularly given that it's over 3 years as well, Rebecca. I think that's, great for the various different organisations that are in receipt of that, that it's providing a long-term vision and strategy, and it's not just a one year off pot of money to try and tackle this. And based on what we were talking about previously about Levchenko, then isn't it great that we're actually putting money behind human rights and equality? And in particular, I mean, the story that came out about Hamza Yusuf and his potential, issues over his child attending nursery over names, and the stigmatisation of that needs addressed. And I sincerely hope that that's something that we can do over the next 3 years. And I very much welcome the organisations that are involved in that, and I look forward to working with them as well.
And Lesley, I mean, how important is it, like, is either affordable or free legal advice in this sector? And do you also think that we have enough altruistic lawyers to help with discrimination cases?
I can't answer the second part of your question, Rebecca, I'm afraid. I mean, to be fair, I know quite a lot of people who've gone into the legal profession precisely because human rights really matters to them, and they want to make a difference, and they want to be able to, enable people to benefit from the law and legislation around these kinds of issues. So, I hope so. Any kind of, when I think about, I've done a lot of work over the years on violence against women issues, and it's so important for people to get good legal advice and for that to be accessible and free, because there's no meaningful discussion. You can't really talk about equality if that fundamental right to good legal advice and legal representation isn't equal because of costs. So this is an important step forward, and I hope it's all about kind of building a culture that recognises and that supports and is very proactive in developing a society which takes these issues really seriously, puts them at the heart of who we are and how we live our lives as individuals and as communities and as a nation. There was something else I was going to say there and it's just gone out of my mind. Let me think, what was Collette, have you got anything you want to say? Just let's see if I can get that.
No, but it's so much like what you're saying, Lesley. Human rights just about covers everything. I mean, even like young people as well going into the workplace and knowing their legal rights in terms of employment as well. I think that's something that's quite reminiscent. Even when I worked as a trade union official, that was absolutely key. That was actually mind blowing for me to learn that we actually had the right, more rights, especially young people, when it comes to like 0-hour contracts as well. So building in free legal advice or how we actually, meet that out from an educational point of view is absolutely key for our young people and moving forward, ensuring that they get equality, and their human rights embedded wherever they are. And obviously we've signed up to the UNCR as well for our children as well. So it is absolutely key that we educate our young people to ensure that they know what their human rights are and their protected characteristics as well.
Actually, you've mentioned protected characteristics, and I sometimes do deliver equalities training in different contexts and different situations, and people who work in the sector, they bandy around those terms, protected characteristics, but I think the majority of people probably don't understand what a protected characteristic is. They maybe don't know, the different categories that have been identified of people who have protected characteristics. And actually, even more fundamentally, I think the language of equality is not very well understood broadly. People often think equality just means treat everybody the same, or treat everybody just as long as you have kind of this notion of equality of opportunity, all will be well, and that's all that's really required. But in fact, we really have to take seriously the need for positive action to support people, and to support people who because they might be, they have one of the protected characteristics such as, disability, or religion, or gender identity, sexuality. There's these range of ones, where you want to be able to make provision so that they are supported and enabled in order to really access meaningful equality. Meaningful equality, which means actually justice. I think it's not just about saying certain people. Let's say just for the sake of argument, white men have let's take them as the kind of norm, which is the way society has tended to work, and then just try to make other people as much like them as possible, or whatever. I mean, that is a very kind of superficial and actually misleading and unhelpful approach to equality and human rights. And so I'm kind of getting back to what Collette was saying, which is that, for young people, for all of us, but particularly for young people and for children, to grow up learning and really understanding these are my rights, and I have a right to claim this in my life, in different circumstances. That's about what it means to be a citizen. Citizenship is about rights and equalities, and creating the space and the access and the opportunity for everybody in fair and just ways, but still recognizing that doesn't mean everyone is the same or should be the same, and that diversity and difference is something actually to celebrate and to welcome. So these are quite complex ideas, actually. And this funding and supporting, specialist groups and organisations that do this really important work is vital. Whether it's in terms of legal advice and legal rights, but more generally, just our kind of our actions and our attitudes in day-to-day living, and to make this kind of central, because if we're seeking to be the nation we want to be, we have to start living that way now, and we have to start really embedding it in all contexts and at every level of Scottish society. So this is all very, very important stuff.
Yeah, that's some great points there. Yeah, definitely. Well, we'll move on to our last topic of this evening, and that is the latest of Tokyo 2020. So Simone Biles retook the gymnastics stage on Tuesday after a week's absence, electrifying the Tokyo Olympics on a day that saw world records smashed and organisers investigate Belarus's treatment of an athlete now in diplomatic protection. The return of the American, considered by many to be the greatest gymnast ever, ensured a blockbuster finale for the sport as Biles took the bronze. She had abruptly dropped out of the team event 7 days ago, citing mental health issues and increasing global awareness of the pressures elite athletes face. Biles said, "I was proud of myself just to go out there after what I've been through." Two Scottish cyclists, Katie Archibald and Nia Evans, also won silver in the women's pursuit in cycling this morning. So, Collette, have you been watching the Olympics this year?
I'll be honest with you, Rebecca, I actually haven't, and I think it's more down to the timing element of it, albeit what I've been tending to do is catching up with it in the mornings on the news as well. And I mean, I followed closely Duncan Scott, our fellow Scot, who was like, oh, he's been absolutely amazing. And the two girls as well, with the cycling, and I listened to their sister, and I think what was it? The other one was to do with the actual boat, or is it and they actually trained in Helensburgh as well. So we're doing pretty well. I think we're actually 6 on the medal table, in terms of UK for our medals. So I can't even compare that with previous years. I think we're slightly down, but there's still a way to catch up. And as far as I know, we've done. I think we've done remarkably well given all the circumstances that we've found ourselves in, and even just that team spirit. Previously, in light of COVID and everything as well, and in terms of and the girl that came out citing mental health, and I watched closely, her coming out and saying she tried her best, and hats off to her for being honest about it, and being brave. And the other thing they talked about, which I thought was really interesting from a feminist point of view, was the forcing of the clothing that they've got to wear.
Yes.
That was quite a big thing. That's something that maybe needs to get looked at. Even the men, in terms of some of their clothing, crop tops and things like that. We've got the right to actually choose what we want to wear, and we're talking about our most elitist athletes in the world here, and it's been forced upon them what to wear. So I found that extraordinary. Is that down to the people that are actually sponsoring them? Is it the sponsorship deals that are going forward? In which case, that's quite, that is in itself a real issue as well. And then obviously I can't finish without talking about knitting. And a diver. Gosh, his name's just went right out. That's absolutely.
Tom Daly.
Tom Daly, and he's knitting, and well done him. They said that he just recently took it up, and it was because he was quite, I think probably really nervous before any big performance, and he get quite angry with himself, and like he does. So I was thinking that that is absolutely amazing. I don't know what he's knitted. I think it's dog outfits or whatnot, or dog beds or something.
Yeah.
Either way, it's very productive, and I think that's off to Tom Daly. And sorry for forgetting your name. That is absolutely dreadful.
No, but well, sadly, that is all we have time for this evening. So thanks again to both Collette and Lesley for coming on this evening. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you both on tonight's programme. So thanks a lot for being here tonight.
Thank you.
And
Thank you,
also
Rebecca.
thanks to all those watching at home. And if you would like to support Broadcasting Scotland, then just follow the link at the bottom of your screen just now. And thanks again for watching.